Carlos Sainz's penalty at the Australian Grand Prix was one of the most brutal we can remember for a long time. As he crossed the line, he was dropped from 4th to dead last, losing 12 World Championship points and ruining an already shoddy weekend for Ferrari. Recently, his team asked for the penalty to be reviewed and the FIA have now responded. Today, we'll fill you in on Ferrari's review request and the FIA's response, as well as a surprising piece of news from Germany relating to Carlos Sainz, so don't go anywhere. First off, thanks for all the comments welcoming me back from holiday. Selfishly, I'm glad you all missed me. I gave you our opinion on the Carlos Sainz penalty at the end of the Australian Grand Prix, during the aftermath of the race a little over 2 weeks ago. The lap 57 restart after the second red flag of the race was utter carnage, and a lot of that carnage was caused by Carlos Sainz braking far too late into turn 1, forcing Pierre Gasly off the track and rear-ending Fernando Alonso. Gasly would go on to rejoin the track and take out his teammate in the process, and Alonso tumbled down the order after clipping the barriers in between turn 1 and 2. His role in the third red flag in the race was deemed worthy of a 5-second penalty by the FIA. The consequence of this, as the grid rolled over the line behind the safety car to finish the final lap, was his demotion from 4th to dead last of those that actually finished the race. The loss of 12 Drivers' Championship points meant instead of being 14 points ahead of Aston Martin's Lance Stroll, he is instead dead level with the Canadian in 5th place on 20. It didn't have much of an immediate effect on the Constructors' Championship, but in the long run, the battle for 6th to 2nd could be very close this season. 12 points could make the difference at the end of November in Abu Dhabi. Ferrari and Sainz were incredibly unhappy about the penalty. He was slamming his steering wheel and desperately pleading with his race engineer to get the FIA to reconsider. If you go and have a listen to his radio message, it's pretty heartbreaking actually. Ferrari was always going to try and get a penalty with such huge consequences overturned. They used their right of review request on the grounds that the decision was made in race, rather than allowing the driver to present their defense to the stewards. It cited a Force India case from 2014 as a precedent for being able to offer a driver witness statement and new telemetry data to get such a punishment overturned. At the Canadian Grand Prix in 2014, the Force India team was allowed a review because their driver, Sergio Perez, had not been spoken to by the stewards before a decision had been made. He'd been in hospital and therefore was unable to see the stewards immediately after the race. Definitely not the same situation, but Ferrari were clutching at anything that would have given them a chance of a review. Speaking of clutching at things to get a review, Ferrari claimed to have another new piece of information that had not been considered by the stewards when they imposed the penalty, which was other drivers' statements taken from post-race interviews. One of these was with Alonso, who said he viewed the penalty as harsh. Sainz's late braking point ahead of the turn 1 collision was provided to the FIA, in addition to the driver arguing too cool tyre temperatures from a slow formation lap and low sun impairing visibility had contributed to the crash. The FIA said they'd already viewed the extensive telemetry to which they had access to before making their decision, and that they did not feel the need to speak to Sainz to decide he was wholly to blame for the incident. Had we thought that this required a statement from Sainz for us to analyse the event, we would have summoned him after the race, their verdict said. We did not consider it necessary then to hear from him to decide that fact. His witness statement, in essence, states how poor the grip was and how the sun was in his eyes. But logic would dictate that the position of the sun would have equally impacted other drivers too. It is not a justifiable reason to avoid a penalty for a collision. They added that the other driver comments were not significant or relevant. This response from the FIA shouldn't surprise anyone. Like we said in the aftermath of the race, Sainz got in a late braking battle with Pierre Gasly and lost control of his car under braking. Carlos Sainz should have known he would have cold tyres. The drivers have that information to hand at all times. I can sympathise with the sun in his eyes, but as the FIA said, everyone was suffering in the same way. And a couple of other drivers saying the penalty is harsh is a ridiculous argument for getting a penalty overturned. Imagine getting detention at school for misbehaving and trying to argue your way out of it by saying your friends think the detention is harsh. You still broke the rules. Despite the frivolity of the appeal, Sainz and Ferrari are still incredibly upset that they haven't had the penalty overturned. Sainz posted to his Instagram story saying, "Very disappointed that the FIA did not grant us a right to review. 2 weeks later, I still think the penalty is too disproportionate, and I believe it should have at least been reviewed on the basis of the evidence and reasoning we've presented. We have to continue working together to improve certain things for the future. The consistency and decision-making process has been a hot topic for many seasons now, and we need to be clearer for the sake of our sport. What happened in Australia is now in the past, and I'm 100% focused on the next race in Baku. I understand why Carlos is upset. The 5-second penalty was probably the most impactful of its kind in F1 history. If anyone can find a 5-second penalty that's cost more than 8 places, I would love to hear about it. At the end of the day though, if that had happened on lap 1, people would be far less upset about it. The punishment for a rule infringement can't be based on the context of the effect of the punishment. That introduces far too many grey areas into the rulebook and leaves the rulebook open to human interpretation. That would be awful for the sport, and it's why you all hated the 2021 Abu Dhabi season finale. Ferrari released a similar statement that looks like it was designed by a 15-year-old graphic design student. Why is it all on a slant? Why is the font so small? And why is the background so bright? The quality of this is about as poor as Ferrari's argument for a penalty review. Anyway, we aren't here to do a meta-analysis of Ferrari's social media postings. The statement basically says the same stuff as Carlos Sainz's. The penalty wasn't fair, we want the rules to be fairer and more consistent. Neither of them points out what part of the process they think is unfair and inconsistent though, and neither offer any suggestions to what could be done to improve. They're just upset about the penalty and are looking to shift the focus from Carlos Sainz's mistake, which isn't anything new in Formula 1. Anyway, enough about the penalty. Let's finish this video by getting you filled in on the most recent rumours coming out of Audi and offer some positive Carlos Sainz related news. German publication Blick are reporting that Audi, who will take over the Sauber team, currently called Alfa Romeo, in 2026, have Carlos Sainz top of their shortlist of potential drivers. Despite a lot of support for Mick Schumacher to feature on the first fully German team in decades, Carlos is currently their top priority. Schumacher may move up the list of potential drivers if he can secure a drive next year, but at the moment, Mick's future in F1 is looking pretty bleak. The choice of Carlos Sainz as a favoured driver has come as a surprise to many people. Despite beating Charles Leclerc in 2021 by 5.5 points, Carlos has never really been favoured by Ferrari. Leclerc has been the Scuderia's long-term project for a long time now, and his performance in 2022 showed us why. He was by far the better of the two drivers. Audi's choice of Sainz is surprising because Charles would probably be open to offers to leave Ferrari. He had a torrid time on the team last season, and the early indications are that this year, Ferrari will be even worse to work with. If not Sainz or Leclerc, then what about Lando Norris? His current McLaren contract runs until the conclusion of the 2025 season, ending at the perfect time for him to switch to Audi for their inaugural season. If the reports are true, then it's great news for Carlos Sainz, but I'd be surprised if he is actually top of their list. What are your thoughts though? Am I doing Carlos a disservice, or is he the best option on the current grid? And do you think his penalty should have been overturned, or have the FIA made the right decision? Let me know your opinions in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.